Sonali and I welcome you all to this week's Sunday special episode of Around the World in 7 Days. Recently, the G20 summit was held under the chairmanship of India. India got many achievements in this meeting. One of these achievements was that India succeeded in getting membership of the G20 group for the African Union. The African Union had been trying to join the G20 for the years, and this time it finally succeeded. In fact, experts believe that since the African Union is a broad grouping of 55 countries, therefore it should get a place in the G20 group for better representation in the global economy. On the other hand, it was also being said that the G20 group needs the African Union. Also, it is being seen as India's success. It is believed that India has now got the lead in the race between India and China for the leadership of the global south. This lead gained by India and Africa is being seen as a challenge for China. In such a situation, the question is, what benefit India will get if the African Union joins the G20? The second question is, how is India moving on the path of becoming the leader of the global south? And the third question is, what kind of challenge India has posed to China? So let us try to understand. Since South Africa is already a member of G20, therefore 96% of the rest of Africa's population and 85% of its GDP were away from this important platform. The African continent is home to 1.4 billion people, and this population is almost equal to that of China or India. If seen from the perspective of economy, African countries will be the 8th largest economy in the world. In such a situation, keeping such a large part of the world economy out till now was not appropriate for the effectiveness of G20. Now that the African Union has joined the G20, the group will represent 55 additional members, a large portion of low-income countries, and the views of nearly 80% of the world's population. Africa, on the other hand, is a comparatively poor continent. A large population of this continent is backward. This is a sensitive area that needs cooperation and development. Due to only South Africa being in an economic group like G20, most of the African countries were not able to benefit economically. With the African Union becoming its member, it is more likely that a large part of Africa will be economically strengthened. The same thing applies to other G20 countries also. By getting a place for the African Union in this group, other countries will be able to gain more benefits from Africa. Africa is a treasure trove of natural resources and energy, and the countries of the world need it. African countries are rich in natural resources such as gold, chromium, platinum, cobalt, diamonds, and uranium. But African Union's joining G20 is not only beneficial for the countries there, India will also get rewards for this effort. In fact, for India, Africa's development is fundamental to its foreign policy objectives. India has always been a vocal supporter of Africa's inclusion in multilateral organizations. India's relations with Africa have been very consistent and regular in recent years. The growing role of Africa in Indian foreign and economic policy is clearly visible in our growing diplomatic efforts, which currently cover 43 African countries. It is also important that India imports about 18% of its crude oil from Africa, especially from countries like Nigeria, Angola, South Sudan. The African continent is also the source of 20% of India's coal. India imports about 90% of cashew nuts and the same amount of phosphate from Africa. India's entire fertilizer industry is based on what it buys from countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and Senegal. India's effort is to connect with Africa and become an ally in its development. The African continent is one of the fastest growing regions in the world, full of economic, cultural, and linguistic